Hey, Bria, welcome. Thanks so much for doing this.
Of course, it's good to see you. It's good to see anybody right now.
Yeah, I know. At the time we're filming this, for anyone who's tuning in at a later date, we're filming this in late April in 2020 during the quarantine lockdown. We've been here quarantined for probably like about a solid month, right? At this point. I mean, you're in New York, correct?
Yeah, you said that like we're in a time capsule. So that
It feels like it.
say, remember that time when human beings evolved telepathy and different limbs so that they could play more instruments? That was back in 2020, and here's a little piece of that time.
Right. Exactly. It really does feel like that. But, to kind of get us started, how have you made the transition between what used to be touring like crazy and you were one of the hardest working musicians out there? How have you made that transition to this time where there is no live work whatsoever? There are few to no options for performing or even income for musicians. How have you made that transition, and how are you making use of this time as a musician? Because I think a lot
Yeah,
of musicians out there are struggling with that.
it's so wild. I still can't even believe a lot of it. Like many of us, it was the beginning of March and we started to hear about it. And then mid-March, something just clicked. You got the first cancellation, and then a domino effect has been happening. And as of right now, I'm going through the feeling of, okay, this is not a month. This is maybe going to be 6 months. And then also the deeper understanding of what does this mean for the next, maybe 2 years. So as musicians, especially as touring musicians, I'm used to thinking 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years in advance, but not usually in the way of saying what isn't going to happen. you
Right.
know? So I'm just, constantly shifting one day at a time. I think that, being a jazz artist in many ways has prepared us for this time. I'd like to think so. I'm a pretty optimistic person. So the improvising aspect of it, um, ups and downs, definitely. Some of the highlights have definitely been collaborating with people. I mean, I've done more videos, just layering videos with people that I've never really shared a stage with in the last couple of weeks. So that's been a real bonus. Also, different kind of chats with different people all over the world. I've been doing some live hangouts. And so in many ways, the positive effects have been connecting with different people from all over. And at the same time, the ones that I'm most used to, I saw all the months of touring lined up with my band go by the wayside. And that's my family in so many ways. And I think some of the darkest moments have just been, that feeling of not being able to just play and express myself with the people that I trust so deeply. I practice a lot. I practice as much as I can, do my routine, we'll get into all that. But really just the feeling of getting it out. I play trumpet. That's the musical equivalent of just screaming all the time.
Right. That's
Or singing, So I know I have that energy. So the question is, how can I redirect that energy in a way that is productive, proactive, and maybe therapeutic?
Have you found that, I mean, obviously nothing is going to match that feeling, but have you found something that, I mean, do you find the live streams, or what is helping you to channel that during this time?
The live streams really help with the feeling of interacting with an audience, because that's a big part of what I love to do. I feed off the energy of audiences, and that's been really a fun part of it. Other than putting on headphones and blasting some recordings that I love, just even, swing stuff, anybody, and jamming along with recordings, which I've done, throughout my musical kind of pursuit. But now it's just to feel like you're standing inside of a band in front of a rhythm section in a front line and playing over some things and interacting with people. That's, I think, the only way I've been able to recreate that feeling a little bit.
Right. That's actually a great suggestion, like almost inhabiting and relying on your imagination to kind of take you to that space in your own mind, because we can't access it in reality. And that's awesome. That's a great suggestion. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
and a lot of times I think if I'm playing on these, the live hangouts, somebody calls a song, I just play it by myself. But in my mind, I have to imagine I've got the Count Basie Orchestra behind me swinging, and I've got our New Orleans brass band, and that also helps, with your sense of time and groove too, is being able to, pre-hear those different things in your head. So in a way, yeah, you can imagine being anywhere.
Yeah. Well, that's a great suggestion. I would say on top of this, one of the things that I've heard, I've been talking with a lot of musicians is like, oh, musicians have a ton of time to practice, but kind of hand in hand, I know we were going to talk about this, is like, it's also, there's an emotional roller coaster that's come with this whole situation, and some of the ups and downs are that. So on certain, you know, when you're looking to get in that practicing state, you know, is there something you use to kind of jumpstart your practice routine or get you inspired? You know, where do you go for inspiration when you're not feeling into it, so to speak?
Yeah, and I think the root of that feeling, you know, for us not having gigs to perform, and for students who are having their final recitals canceled, their final performances, the big question is, what's the point? You
Right.
know, or if I'm not playing a 2-hour concert, do I need to practice 2 or 3 hours a day right now to keep those chops up? And, you know, these are again questions that I ask myself, but at least, you know, with trumpet, trumpet is kind of a merciless instrument in
Right.
that
If you
they
don't
don't,
practice, it'll let you know.
maybe, you know, maybe this is the universe finally saying, just take some, maybe just stop. Yeah, you know, there are some tricks that I definitely rely on. One is that I have a routine that's like up to an hour of just basic technical stuff. And there's actually an app that I've been using called Modacity.
Okay.
You know, just thought
Yeah,
I'd share that.
I've heard of it.
Not a paid advertisement. It's just something. One day I was like, I need help. I need help staying on track.
Right, right, right.
Please, I've always needed that. But when my day had more uh, structural timelines to it, then I knew that I could, you know, force myself to do something. But the app is just, you can set up your own daily practice routines and stuff. And what's good about it is that when you're done one thing, you kind of give yourself a thumbs up or whatever, and then it goes immediately to the next exercise.
Mm.
I think one of the things that I follow that makes me fall by the wayside is doing an exercise and then just taking a minute to get a glass of water, like flip on my phone, and then half an hour's gone by and I have to go back.
Right, those interruptions into your practice. Yeah.
Exactly. So I've been using that app a little bit to kind of keep me on track, and also just, yeah, I mean, it's still a routine. As long as if you get into the shed, even if it's just for 5 minutes, chances are if you talk yourself into going for 5 minutes, it'll end up being 15 minutes or maybe longer.
Right, it's just the actual starting that's the hardest part. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So for anybody, that continues. I mean, I still definitely struggle with that too. And leave your horn out of the case where you can see it.
Well, okay, so yeah, you're saying basically allow the practice space or your instrument to be readily accessible. Because if that's, the easier that is to just pick up and play, that'll remove any barrier.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
Great suggestions. I mean, you know, one thing you pointed out that I think is really important is that you're right. If there are no gigs, if there are no live events, then what's the point? And I think that maybe that kind of gets to, and for all of us, helps us kind of think a little deeper than we're usually used to when there's always a gig, which is why am I doing what I'm doing? And also, when there is no one telling you or no reason to do it, do you still love to do it?
Yeah.
And we kind of hope, I mean, this is an interesting time to maybe it will separate those people, you know, in a sense, like the true players who play for just the true enjoyment of playing, no matter whether there's a gig or not, you know.
And the enjoyment or the idea of discipline as a practice. You know, I love, again, trumpet. I joke about it being a merciless instrument, but I'm so grateful to it because it keeps me honest. It keeps me on a schedule. It keeps me, you know, like there are regimented things that I need to do on a daily basis. And that just keeps me in line with the things I have to do.
Right. It's a healthy regimen as opposed to one that if without it, you would just go about all these other things that might be, you know, not lead to anywhere you actually want to go.
Yeah. So, and again, I think some of the collaborations with people that inspire me or finding songs that challenge, you know, definitely setting your own challenges, setting your own goals is a big part of it right now. You know, ultimately, I really feel like, you know, you are the best teacher of yourself,
Mm-hmm.
as long as you're being honest with yourself about what your weaknesses are and how to address them. You know, you should be able to find exercises or create exercises that challenge those.
Well, that's a great point. I mean, you're right. We know ourselves best, but I think what comes with that though, is that the person has to be aware of themselves. And I think a lot of times it's like that self-awareness is lacking, or just the practice of analyzing oneself. So how did you come up with a process of analyzing yourself? What are some suggestions if someone's like, well, I don't know what I need to do best? How do you figure that out? Yeah, you're Bria, but how do I figure that out? Because we have young audience members. Like, was there something that you point to that helps you start to go through that process?
Yeah, that's a great point. Of course, I didn't always think this way.
No,
This is
no, I just
something maybe for survival that I've also figured out. So yeah, that makes sense. You know what has helped me for, I mean, my biggest struggles are technical. I think music, I love to play music. I love to just, play through, but just getting the facility on the instrument enough to access the ideas that I hear in my head and my heart is,
mm,
what we always strive towards. And so I've, broken down the technical aspects of playing into basically air, embouchure. This is going to get really geeky.
no, we love it. Let's go.
I have a pyramid of air, embouchure, basically tonguing, articulation or flexibilities, and dexterity, finger work, and everything. And I think of those very separately about where the weaknesses are in them, and focus on exercises that challenge them individually, and work with a metronome is a very important part of that process. Working with the metronome to be able to track your progress over all of those different areas. So I can't remember the beginning.
No, that makes sense. I mean, so this framework, right, is that you come up with, obviously, like you're saying, is really important to keeping you, and having that system is how you kind of keep checking in on certain key metric, like the aspects of your playing, right, that you're wanting to keep checking in on. But is that because you're still setting like a longer term goal that's saying like, I want to sound like X, so that like why are those the things that then you're measuring to what
Sure.
to what end? Yeah.
So if I was to take a transcription that I clearly can't play, I could break down the different aspects of those technical pieces to see what I need to work on. So for example, if there's a note in it that is higher than my range, then I know for me that's air and embouchure. Those are the things that I need to work on, or enable to get the range that I need to. Perhaps the pieces, the articulation needs work, and so I slow that down, and I'll go through just the articulation of the piece. So I'm also a big fan of isometric exercises, which mean exercising the muscles away from the instrument. So I'll go through a whole solo without the horn on my face, with a metronome at a certain speed, going to get my tongue in shape, paying attention to, necessarily what kind of articulation it is. Also the same with dexterity of fingers is same thing. Like, this is a passage that I clearly can't play. Well, let's take the instrument out of the other pieces, the articulation, the embouchure out of the equation, air, and just get the metronome and try to get the combinations down with my fingers up to speed in a way that they're strengthened, and then layer those things together. So I think picking pieces, obviously, that are beyond your playing ability, but then systematically breaking them down into those categories to work on individually and then layer them together.
Right. So aim high, and then if there's components, you break the components down, master them, and slowly build it back up. And then you should, that makes total sense.
Being very honest with yourself about whether or not you're hitting it. If you can't, put that metronome back.
You record yourself to help do that, or this is just something you're just constantly listening to yourself, and you just have a healthy, self-discipline to say, hey, you're messing up, or hey, you got this,
Yeah, I think at this point, I should record myself. That's a very good way to find again, call out your own bull.
Yeah.
But at this point, I'm just like, okay, that's not happening. I know it's not,
Well, no, I mean, we always get better, but I mean, that was just, I mean, look, how many times have we all been told that suggestion as well? That record yourself, that is truly something to work on, that, we all need to get better at. But that's cool that you have that system, that even without that, you have that, you're maintaining that yourself. You're not just a trumpet player though, you're also a vocalist. Do you isolate those as two separate things, or do you just think about it holistically? Obviously, in some senses, you have to practice certain things as far as, the tune, singing it or something. But when in your practice routine, or even as a musician, do you view yourself in separate ways, or as an entirety?
A little bit of both at this point. For everybody who's out there who's a player, don't forget that the instrument is just an amplifier for your own ideas. they originate here. They originate here, here, here. And so if you can verbalize them, don't even call it singing. It's not about pitches or anything necessarily. It's just the idea of verbalizing your own ideas and then being able to try to execute them on your instrument. I think that's a very, very, very big part of linking your voice with your instrument. And again, why we practice the technical aspects to be able to make those seamless. But I did, I did take I have taken vocal lessons in the past through university as a secondary, and now and then I'll still take some to kind of spot check it. And so if I have what I call a gig where I know that I'll be doing a lot of singing, then I'll maybe a couple weeks before I'll kind of do the right exercises and stuff to prepare and gain strength. Much like playing an instrument, nothing gives you the same endurance as performing the pieces that you're going to be doing. So that's where I get the most, experience and strength with it. But there was a time several years ago where I didn't feel like both voices were lining up. I couldn't tell, they were just kind of fighting a little bit, or, and my singing voice can tend to be a little smoky or bluesy, and my trumpet is like fiery and bright. So I had to really focus on finding ways to synthesize those two, both in timbre and ideas, I guess. So there are some games that I'll play, like I don't have perfect pitch, so I'll just
me neither. Yeah, me neither.
No, I don't care. There's nothing I can do about it now. But I'll just sing it up and grab my horn
and shoot.
Try to play it.
Yeah.
Ear training exercises like that, one note at a time, and then add a second note to it. Just kind of play back and forth, call and response with myself. Those are ways to synthesize those voices. But as far as instruments, the breath support is the same. The difference being the mouthpiece buzz happens here. With vocal cords, it happens here. So I've spent a little bit of time studying the instruments to understand how that happens, how resonance happens here. Ultimately, they have informed each other in a good way. When I play melodies, I'm definitely playing the lyrics to a song more often than not, which help with the interpretation. And when I sing a song, I'll often embellish it a little bit like a horn player. Sometimes I'll even just, to help me get my pitch, I'm like,
you're like behind your back, you're like figuring the entire thing.
I'm not one of those people that pretends, but I do use it as like a little spot check to know the intervals.
Yeah. It's just, well, that's cool. That's what you already kind of answered what I was going to ask. How do they inform each other? Because, a couple things. I notice any trumpet player also has great pitch control when it comes to singing, just because naturally they're working on that aspect so much more than any other instrumentalist that also sings. There's just any trumpet player I met who's like, I can sing, or they just have such a good control of that already. I'm not saying they're top singer, but they get that control just as a byproduct of that instrument.
Yeah, it's almost like a target practice. How much support do I need to get this note for this long?
Well, so this kind of leads into something else that I was trying to, like, when I was talking about how do you think about yourself, we first met because you actually were taking the JazzMemes six-figure audience course about like expanding your audience and your online audience. And so that's how we first kind of met you. But then we met you in person at Jazz Congress. How, we've had conversations with you basically on brand, and this is a concept that we've been trying to educate our audience on. Is like, you have to think beyond just the notes of like what you're playing, but how you present yourself. The whole thing is important. And in this day and age, you can control almost every aspect of it. How do you think about how you present yourself when there's so many moving parts? As a trumpet player, as a vocalist, how have you brought that together as what feels natural and congruent with who you are? Like, obviously that's been a process, right? To build up Bria Skonberg as a brand. How have you worked on that?
Yeah, big question.
Yeah. So super easy to answer.
Yeah, because like everybody, it feels kind of slimy to think about. You're like, oh, the brand new this, or I think it has to come from an authentic place of who are you? This is something to ask. Who are you? What do you sound like, and what do you care about? are ultimately the core questions that you should ask yourself, and then see how everything else in your life reflects that. You know, what are the things, what are your values? You know, I think I've always loved finding ways to get people together, get people to connect, and how to motivate people to get excited about different things. You know, if I was to rewind back to my high school days, I did a lot in the band program. Of course, I played and I sang. I was in a ska band. I had a lot of fun, but I also, I was on sports teams. You know, I had a megaphone. I would yell, start all the cheers, etc. And I was on student council, organizing events for the mass goods, and just kind of getting into the whole spirit of things. Those are just, that had a little bit to do with where I come from, my hometown, which had in my memory, in my heart, has a lot of spirit like that. But that's something that I've tried to continue to bring forward, is, you know, that spark of like, okay, what can I do that would be fun or funny or interesting, or, you know, get people together. And music has just been the best, greatest vehicle to communicate with people all over the world with that. So I think at this, if that is, I think if I embody something, or maybe I hope that my brand is that I'm just open. I'm so open, especially at this point now that, you know, I've been through enough of life experience and stuff playing, and I don't, you know, I'm comfortable with who I am.
Yeah.
You know, I'm comfortable with who I am through trial and error, through many different things, and those are the things that I value and that excite me and interest me.
Okay, right. It's a huge topic, and I think a lot of times when someone first says brand, it's kind of like, oh, it's like, how do you sell yourself? But it's not. That's the slimy part that I think people associate with it, is like the business aspect of it. But I think to what you're saying is like, you got more in tune with who you are, what you're about, and yourself, and by doing so, the presentation of it came together. Because I mean, this aspect comes into play, I think, in every aspect. Like, think about if, you know, once you get to a certain point in your music career after school and whatnot, it's like you can practice anything. So it's like, how do you make the decisions about what are the songs you like to play? What are the things that you want to head in that direction? Because once you have a certain facility, it's like, so those are where those questions of brand, I guess what I meant is like, you have, when I think of Bria, it's like, there's so much to what you're doing and what you present. And I guess it was just like, you bring this unique combination of all of these factors, the songs that you choose, the way that you sing, the instruments that you're playing, you know, all these come together in a unique thing that only is you. So I guess you know, this is a larger question, but for the younger audience, it's like something they need to start thinking about as far as getting towards that, asking themselves those questions. So I think you hit it. That's what I was kind of getting at, is like, how did you start to think about that? And it's something that's done over a lifetime.
Yeah, exactly. It took a long time. It took a long time because, you know, I was brought up in this wonderful scene of especially traditional jazz, roots jazz. And I felt, you know, for a long time that I wanted to make sure that I appeased that audience as well. And because it's something that I love, but I needed to take some chances along the way. And finding your own voice comes over time. You know, I think there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of conversation about how to find your voice these days. But I just also think that you need to spend a lot of time studying what came before worrying too much about that as well. Right, you know, okay. I culture, you know, maybe.
Right, 100%. Right, like there's a little bit of unhealthy narcissism there when you're like, oh, I already know what I have to say, without, like what you're saying, studying a little bit of what came before. You might be repeating something that's already been done.
And as far as you know, again, as far as branding, I was a band leader right out of high school. My high school, we had a combo, and most of us went into music in different schools going into university. So we kept the band together. So everything that I had done to that point, from, you know, leading sports teams and organizing events, had bubbled into this sort of entrepreneurial mindset of, okay, how do I make this, how do I get to be part of events? And I have a product that I can, you know, share here. We've got some peppy kids. What do we look like? What do we sound like? And how do I describe it? How do I create an experience through words or, you know, sharing videos that makes people get excited and makes us want to go in and do those things? So between that and, you know, you said the six-figure audience course, you know, here I am. I've been a professional for quite a while now, but I'm still learning, still sharpening that saw. The gates keep changing, and that's why I signed up for the course, because I was like, there are certainly more to learn along this whole way. So I do think about it. I guess the answer is that I'm conscious of it, and that will immediately help, you get better at it.
No, I think you're right. I just don't think the conversation even happens. So that's why I think it's great, like artists like yourself are, it's not that you become so consumed with brand that the actual substance goes out the window, but it's also that you're making sure that the substance actually gets communicated well because you've thought about how to present it.
And ask yourself, what do you want to say, and what is it you don't want to say? What are you communicating right now that it's contrary to what you actually want to be known for? Whether that is how you're presenting yourself, obviously visually, but how are you writing comments on other people's pages? What is your dialogue? Those sorts of things. And is it authentic, or are you doing it from a place to garner certain attention? And is it the right attention for the long term? I think that's important.
Difficult questions to answer, but ones that need to be answered.
Yeah. Do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah. Don't look to JazzMemes for the we start fires sometimes.
Okay.
Well, Bria, I want to be respectful of your time. I appreciate everything that you've done for us. I mean, it's just great to get on the phone and talk, especially during this time, and connect with you. Where can people find you? Where can they keep connecting with you, both during this time and afterward? What's the best place?
Yeah. The easiest way is to Google Bria, B-R-I-A, trumpet. It's easier than spelling my last name. You'll find any sort of anything I've got going on the interwebs. That's definitely the best spot. And I want to thank you guys. I think throughout this whole career and this pandemic and beyond, humor is the most important thing. It's not where you are, it's who you're with and what you're listening to, and we gotta laugh. We have to continue to laugh through it all. So I'm really appreciative to be a part of that with all of you.
Thank you. Amen. We just try hard to continue the same things we were taught around the great jazz legends we grew up with, and they always knew how to make everyone laugh along with the music. So we felt that was lacking, and we just trying to bring our part of that to the jazz community. But thank you for saying that, Bria. Before we go, is there anything you want to leave our audience with? Anything at all? Just a thought or just a sentiment, if anything.
A couple things. Let's see. We talked about before this a little bit about making the move to New York, what that was with. I think something that I've learned over time is just to embrace being uncomfortable. If you want to make progress or make changes, you kind of have to go to the places where you can learn the most, and a lot of times that involves taking risks. But you'll learn a lot, and you'll learn about yourself in that process for sure. Otherwise, just keep your bell up, stay connected, and we'll be making music on the other side of this before too long.
Well said. Thanks so much, Bria. Again, be well, stay safe, and I'm sure we'll see you again soon. Thank you.